This was the scene just 1 month ago as protesters violently stormed the Capitol building to reject the results of the 2020 presidential elections. Lawmakers ran for safety as the protesters made their way into the chambers shortly after the 2020 election certification began. 5 people died as a result of that attack. FBI officials received warnings of a possible planned attack on the Capitol just days before, but Capitol Police were unable to stop the protesters from entering the building. Dozens of Trump supporters were arrested following the January 6th attack, including several members of far right-wing groups. Now, Congress is forced to confront the fallout from the assault, including the impeachment of former President Trump. Joining me now with more on all of this is former FBI Assistant Director Frank Figliuzzi. Frank, thank you so much for joining us. You are also the author of Inside the Bureau's Code of Excellence, the FBI Way. Frank, what kind of security can we expect to see at the Capitol building during this impeachment trial? Do we know if there's any elevated risk during this period?
So while law enforcement's telling us that there's no specific threat to the impeachment trial, they are also acknowledging that they've enhanced security anyway because of the obvious concerns. Specifically, we're hearing reports that the Capitol Police have provided security details to each and every one of the House impeachment managers. And that includes the real challenge of when these folks travel home, for example, and coordinating with TSA and air marshals so that there's coverage from door to door as they go back to their home districts as well.
Yeah, we saw a lot of video coming out of airport lobbies of, Congressmen. I'm thinking of Mitt Romney and Lindsey Graham specifically being heckled quite vociferously by Trump supporters in the lobby to the point where it looked dangerous. So what's being taken to what steps are being taken to rectify that?
Well, the Capitol Police are stretched to the max. I mean, they're not used to providing full protection details for so many members at the same time. And so they're going to have to use other services like the U.S. Marshals, the Air Marshals, and TSA and other DHS level employees. But clearly, you're going to see a line item for the budget. Even Nancy Pelosi has hinted at this. That's going to increase and enhance security for the Capitol Police. But there's an even larger issue, which is what does the security posture look like going forward around the Capitol? And that planning is going to be done in part by a retired General Honore, who's been brought on to do a complete assessment of Capitol security needs.
Right, and you bring up a really good point because the Capitol building has been known as the People's House, right? And I'm sure the optics of having it surrounded by 12-foot-high fences with barbed wire is not the image that America wants to project of the People's House. So there's going to be a balance that needs to be struck, correct?
We're all saddened by what the optics look like right now. They're necessary, but for the short term. But you're right. In the long term, we want to have a free and open government. And even with the White House, you see there's pedestrian walkway. They closed it to car traffic in front of the White House in Pennsylvania Avenue. There's going to be a use of technology here like I think we've never seen before, behind the scenes, even perhaps drones, cameras, tactical teams that you can't see. I predict that you're going to see that in the planning for the Capitol.
And, Frank, I want to go back to what happened on January 6th, because understandably there was a lot of criticism following that attack. People could not believe it happened, regarding the response of local and federal law enforcement. What do you believe caused the significant delay in the necessary response and the unwillingness to act on all of this intelligence that it's now coming out that we had or that was there, suggesting that there would be a riot?
Well, you're asking a key next level question, which is not how did we get here? Why did we have an inadequate security posture? But the next level up is why, when this was happening, real time, did we not see the kind of quick, immediate surge of area law enforcement into this insurrection? And we need an independent commission to answer those hard questions. I'm concerned that we are going to hear political answers behind some of this. We're going to hear things like, well, someone didn't want a hardened perimeter. Someone didn't want a tactical team inside ready to deploy or snipers on rooftops. But we know the Secret Service, for example, had a protectee in the building, Vice President Pence. They knew what the intel was, yet we didn't see their counter-assault team until much later. FBI, about 50 minutes to respond to a call for help. National Guard, lots of haggling about yes, no, where, how, why. We need answers for that, and we can't have this happen again.
So what are the specific questions that you would like to see levied at who exactly? Because you seem to zero in on what we need to know to ensure that we don't get political answers.
Well, I'm afraid the answers might be political in terms of who was pulling strings and who wanted this to happen or who was willing to look the other way. But this is precisely why there must be an independent commission as opposed to a congressional inquiry, because look at the reality. We have Congress members who were victims that day, and we allegedly have Congress members who might have given tours, escorts, guidelines, backdoor entry plans for some of the alleged planners or activists here. So we can't have Congress looking into this. It's got to be an independently appointed commission, and we've got to look at the buildup of intelligence in the days prior. We've got to look at gaps in the system and why we don't have a domestic terrorism law, and then we have to determine specifically who played a role in the failures that happened on January 6th.
And how does the FBI track potential threats to the Capitol building? And do you suspect that method is changing following the assault last month?
Yeah, I do think we're seeing a far more assertive posture. Now that we know violence has occurred, the FBI feels less constrained because they know what the threat truly is now. But let's make no bones about it. There are free speech and privacy and civil liberties issues inherent whenever you start tracking social media, and there are accusations of, hey, I don't want ideology policed in our society, and no one wants that. So that fine line between rhetoric and violence needs to be parsed out, and the FBI needs to be let loose and given license through certain legislation that will allow them to do what they already do against international terrorism threats. They've got a law, they've got an enhanced toolkit. They need the same thing for the domestic threat.
So you're saying their hands are more tied when it comes to acting on domestic threats?
Yeah, there's no question about it. Look, we've not had a major act of international terrorism on U.S. soil since 9/11. There's a reason for that. There's a success story there because we have laws in place, a law against international terrorism, for example. We can designate international terrorist groups, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, etc. When you are tripping into those groups or even become associated with them, here comes federal law enforcement all over that, covering those websites, chat rooms, inserting FBI undercover agents, informants. None of that has been happening until it's way too late on the domestic scene. We don't have a domestic terrorism law. We do treat people differently of a different religion if they're into violent jihad. We need to take that wall down between domestic terrorism and international terrorism.
Let's hope that begins to happen soon. All right. Well, Frank Figliuzzi, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your insight.
Of course.